when you finish your schooling and you find this out, you have this aha moment, which is like, I've been duped. You tricked me. Not cool. As I learned more and more, I started to realize that, hey, these guidelines aren't helpful. And I dug heavily into the statins and the side effects of, and doing a deep dive on cholesterol and research and these side effects, and counseling patients that clearly have brain fog and muscle aches, and going, I think you need to reconsider this. And at some point, the patient almost has to make a choice to say, do I listen to my cardiologist or do I listen to this pharmacist telling me that I have brain fog and side effects from their statin? You don't know until you've tried. And I would say, just give me 3 weeks. Give me 3 weeks. Give me that. I just want 3 weeks. And if I'm totally wrong, money back guarantee, whatever, like you can come after me and haunt me for the rest of my life. But I'm 100% certain that in 3 weeks, you're going to feel different. You're going to feel and look better. Absolutely. Every single, and it's not like some patients, and it's like, oh, well, it only works on certain body types or certain blood types, or no, it works on Homo sapiens.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, ladies and gents. It's wonderful to have you joining me again today. I have a fantastic guest for you all who has stories to tell and a message to share. His name is Kyle Rootsaert. He got his doctoral degree from Xavier. He got his residency as UCSF. And since then, he has been a pharmacist for over 25 years. And this should be a fun one because pretty much any time previously that we've ever mentioned anything to do with pharmaceuticals, it has been in a very critical, negative light. But we've got someone here who knows that industry better than anyone I've had on so far, because you were in it. You were in the belly of the beast, and you have you are taking it down from the inside. So I can't wait to hear the story. Kyle Rootsaert, thank you so much for joining me today, sir.
Thank you, Ben. What an intro. That's really cool. That's fun. Yeah, that's what I've been doing. But drugs have their place, but I would really preserve that or reserve that for acute, not for chronic disease.
And this is something that Dr. Chavy talks about. We were chatting before we recorded how we're not saying that there are some modern benefits to all these fancy new technologies we have and the new, pharmaceutical abilities we have to make certain things that can help people in certain cases. But like you said, these should not be chronic subscriptions people are taking and things that are just lifelong, just daily pills. And before we get too ahead of ourselves, though, why don't we go back into your story? Because you have a very interesting story, your education, your background, how you got into this field, and this weird diet that you found that changed everything.
Yeah. Gosh, you don't have to. You know what? Like, if I said I went to pharmacy school, med school, you would probably come up to the same conclusion that we didn't get any nutritional training. My understanding of nutrition was what came in this giant bag that you hung next to a patient, called a TPN, total parental nutrition. And that had fats, it had dextrose in it, and it had protein in it. And you hung it and you infused it into the patient, into these sick patients. That is a pharmacist's perspective of nutrition. So it's like when somebody, and this is really where it started. I had a patient come up to me in a retail setting and goes, I have this glucose meter and this metformin and these test strips. What's this all about? And I'm like, well, you're diabetic. And she's like, what? She just started bawling. I'm like, this is not my job. This is not the pharmacist's responsibility. I dispense. I don't console patients for this, what they consider a death sentence diagnosis of diabetes. And I'm like, this is crazy. I thought the doctor and the patient communicated with each other. And then when you start doing the math and go, okay, these doctors are seeing a patient every 15 minutes and they are documenting, I don't know, half that time or 5 out of every 15 minutes, they're documenting what they're doing with these patients. So the physician is not spending time educating patients at all, even though that's really the definition of doctor is teacher. So frustrating as it was, she asked me the one question that I cannot stand saying, I don't know. But she asked me, what am I supposed to eat? What am I supposed to do? Like, I really, to be completely honest, I know about TPNs. I don't know what it's like in the real world. So I really, when I started my journey, I did not know much at all about nutrition. I'm like, I got to get back to you on that because I don't like saying I don't know. So it's like, okay, what should I learn? What is diabetes, right? And why do I got to take metformin with food? And like, does it lower, what lowers my, and I just did this crazy deep dive and I started, I wanted to know how I could help the patients. How could I educate them? And so I found a course, like a monthly subscription, and it was called Creative Pharmacist. And they would give you these canned lectures to do diabetic education, to make the pharmacy accredited to do diabetic education. It's covered by Medicare. Each diabetic patient gets 8 hours of education, and that's what I wanted to provide. So I went in and I did these canned lectures, and I never thought of myself as a teacher. And I remember teaching these like 8-hour courses to patients. And then they go, we'll be back next week. And I'm like, well, class is over. I don't know what you want, but if you actually want to hear me, I'm going to automatically say yes. And I will something's going to happen. I'm going to grow. I get to do this opportunity. I need to change my mindset and go, yeah, I'm going to take on that challenge because I know I'm going to be a different person and I'm going to progress and I'm going to have more answers than I have now to some of these questions. So we developed this diabetes support group, and we were doing classes in buildings with no heat. We were doing I actually did a class in a Masonic temple. We did it in just anywhere I could get room, right? Library, didn't matter. One time I did, we were doing it at Round Table Pizza in the morning before they opened up, and you can just smell the yeast as we were, But you know what?
As you're telling people specifically to not eat the thing that
Yes.
they can smell.
Just pretend like you can't smell that right now. Yeah. Yeah. So they'd be drooling when they get out of there. But it was like the trophy room. It was kind of separated. And these people, they wanted to share with each other. And I saw the value of community. I was like, this is a community. And they know that when they go there, that they have their lowest A1Cs. When they're consistent about showing up and sharing, that they are accountable to themselves. And yeah, the reversal was astounding. And I was really excited because they were doing very well. And I was studying all week to try to come up with material for them. And it probably wasn't so much the material as it was them bonding together as a group. So yeah, I worked at CVS for quite a long time. As I learned more and more, I started to realize that, hey, these guidelines aren't helpful. And I dug heavily into the statins and the side effects and doing a deep dive on cholesterol and research and these side effects, and counseling patients that clearly have brain fog and muscle aches, and going, I think you need to reconsider this. And at some point, the patient almost has to make a choice to say, do I listen to my cardiologist or do I listen to this pharmacist telling me that I have brain fog and side effects from their statins? And that is really disheartening. It's very difficult. And that is probably today my biggest source of frustration, is knowing that people are dealing with side effects. Matter of fact, I was in a diner listening to these two sisters have breakfast together and hearing one of them almost like slur words. Like, what is wrong? I had to open my mouth. I couldn't let it go. And that is it's a struggle to stay quiet. And I hear, and
I know that feeling. I know that feeling.
But it's how do I get from where I am right here to actually putting into action? And yes, I have, I've met a lot of people that way. I've had a lot of people approach me that way, asking me questions, but knowing that, here's this person suffering, and I could make that change and go, hey, are you on Lipitor? Are you on a stat? Oh yeah, I'm on a stat. Well, okay. You know what? You may consider, I kind of notice how and sometimes you're like, I can't wait to meet you again, because in 6 months from now, I would meet a different person. Hey, if you don't believe me, fine. Go off of it and see if your side effects go away, and then re-challenge, go back. I mean, so many people are taking this drug for primary prevention. This makes no sense. And we threw women We threw women who are more neurologically sensitive to the side effects of statins than men, and we're wondering why they have brain fog. This is not cool because I see this in a very personal way. It's really difficult. But I started doing these classes. I started really getting into it, and because I got the pharmacy certified as well as myself. And so here I was learning the guidelines. And this is like 2013. So 2013, 2014, I get a hold of Robert Lustig, Jason Fung, Steve Finney, Jeff Bullock, Gary Taub's work, and then in 2015 it was Sarah Hallberg saying ignore the guidelines. And I remember just the emotion that came over me. Like, I've been studying these guidelines, and she's saying ignore the guidelines. I quickly ran over, started looking up who wrote at that time it had been 2015 guidelines. And I started looking at those principal investigators, and I go, well, how much money do they get from industry? So go to openpaymentsdata.cms.gov, and your world will be shattered. You will see all the conflicts of interest. Who got paid? How much they got paid? What industry paid them? So when you see these conflicts, you have to take these seriously. Any conflicts, I don't care what it is. You have to ask yourself, and you could never answer yourself properly, but how did this conflict of influence, what did this conflict of interest, how did it influence you in your decision-making as a so-called expert? Why do I need to listen to you? How did you get paid? How did industry pay you off? So when I see that, it's like, okay. And that's, you know what? It's with this day and age and the computer and the technology that we have, there is no reason that we can't all do our research. This is open payments data.cms.gov, as well as open secrets. You want to know how your politicians voted? You want to see how they're getting paid, who's paying them? Go find out. You want to do research on somebody? It takes just a little bit of the right questions to be able to go, all right, not taking this person seriously. Anything that comes out of this association, ADA, AHA, whatever, you got to stop caring about what journal it was printed in, because New England Journal of Medicine, Journal of American Medical Association, JAMA, they are all guilty. They have taken money from industry. So when you finish your schooling and you find this out, you have this aha moment, which is like, I've been duped. You tricked me. Not cool. But you know what? I even think about like just recently, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to get duped. I'm going to go look conflicts of interest. I did not go into much time and energy during COVID. I was focusing on really cholesterol and LDL and what increased the risk of COVID patients in the hospital. So COVID to me was like very fascinating. I was like, why aren't we focusing on vitamin D? Why aren't we focusing on reducing this spike protein's affinity for ACE2 receptors, which are higher in diabetics and people with insulin resistance? This should be our focus. We could do something about it. We could mitigate and quarantine basically those that are very vulnerable. We didn't do that. It was a mess. And it's because we trusted. And I look at that and go, we've made this mistake over and over again in history. Why aren't we learning? Why are we keep looking for the so-called experts to do the thinking for us? We have everything in front of us. We're just being lazy, right? And someone with the background, like a pharmacist or physician or a dietitian or nurse, if you have that background, or you just have that curiosity, you can chase every single rabbit. There's so much information available, but you will realize that your background prepared you to be where you are and go, all right, how can I help others? How can my background in pharmacy go, all right, this is how you help people. This is how you get them off of medication. This is how we look at chronic disease differently, right? Chronic disease is, it's man-made. It's dietary for the most part. Like, what can we do about our diet? And so I worked in a diabetes clinic for quite a while, and we needed a gong. because people would walk out of there going, they lost 20 weight, they're no longer diabetic, they're leaving the clinic, you're never going to see them again. They took particularly the coaching that I provided with the CGM, the continuous glucose monitor. What an awesome tool. That is such a game-changing tool, that knowing what your foods do to you and the hormonal imbalance that it creates is like, that's the education. That's the teaching tool. That's everything. That really, because before I was trying to walk the talk and go, all right, I'm going to start sticking my finger like I wanted every diabetic. And I really felt like I could treat everyone's diabetes with this insulin that came in a vial. I never thought that I make my own, that the cells can dial up their resistance to insulin. You were myself, as well as even physicians, I say, you know what, it's insulin resistance, and they're like, wow, they never talked about insulin at all. It came in a vial, and you knew the kinetics of that insulin, and when do you use insulin. But it wasn't until, like, Jason Fung explains this very well. Diabetes, there's type 1 and type 2. So normally insulin is kept in this super tight range. Type 1, not enough, you need to bring it up. Type 2, too much, you got to bring it down. How are you going to bring your insulin levels back to optimal, which we know is low, really low, and we're not measuring it? That's what we should be measuring. That is the preventative medicine. Because not only will it predict the same symptom like you expect in diabetes, blood sugar finally rises, but completely opposite reasons. One, your blood sugar is elevated because you don't have enough insulin. The other one's elevated because you have insulin resistance. Like, the cells are not responding to insulin, so glucose levels start to rise. Completely opposite of each other, really, when it comes to the pathophysiology. One's too much, one's not enough, but you still have the same symptom. Glucose is elevated. Well, what are we missing in that when we have a glucose-centric perspective of diabetes? You're focusing on the wrong. That's not the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is the insulin. You need to be measuring insulin. Measuring insulin, or if you want to do a triglyceride to HDL ratio, that's an indirect and pretty accurate way of determining what your insulin level is. But we're not measuring, because you've got the ADA creating confusion around this insulin level. I would tell everyone, get an insulin level. I don't care what they say. Get it. Make sure it's optimal. Less than 6 is ideal. You know where you need to be, but that's the elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about. Whether you develop diabetes or not is not relevant. Cardiovascular disease, right? Hypertension, visceral adiposity, where you're getting too big, obese. But obesity is just a sign. It doesn't mean just because someone's overweight that they're unhealthy. We have to be digging further. We can't tell from, for example, TOFI people, like thin on the outside, fat on the inside. So they got fat, visceral fat, creating metabolic syndrome, creating this insulin resistance, making it worse. And here we are, we're not measuring it. You're saying that as long as their cholesterol level is good, or they might even put you on a statin and ignore everything else. The problem with metabolic syndrome is you got 5 things, 5 findings: high blood pressure, high blood sugar, expanded waistline, high triglycerides, low HDL. I didn't say LDL. I never mentioned LDL. I never mentioned cholesterol. But that's what your doctor's focused on. They will hone in on that, and they'll ask them, do I have elevated triglycerides? You're probably going to show up, you're going to be just fine if you're under like 200, 250. Those markers are so far off because you're sampling a sick population. You're saying this is the norm. 200 should never be the norm. Under 100 should be optimal. I don't care about the colors, okay? You want optimal, and there's a whole new definition as to what optimal is. I've heard doctors tell patients that there's nothing wrong with them when their triglycerides are 250 and their HDL is like 45. That to me says your ratio, which is like 6, is way off. And that ratio should be less than 1.5. So if you take your triglycerides and you divide it by the HDL, let's get that number 2 or less. That's a good sign. You're going in the right direction. But if it's above that number, you got work to do. And the only way to drop triglycerides is through diet. That is, like, you think about, okay, triglycerides are extra fat in the bloodstream. Why do I have extra fat in the bloodstream? I'm taking excess carbs, converting it into fat. There's nowhere for the fat to go. The fat has to back up. It's going to back up because that's not your fuel source. If you're a carb person, if you're a high carb, if you're a typical SAD diet person, carbs are your main fuel source, not fat. And that fat's triglycerides. So if you're a fat burner, triglycerides and fat in the bloodstream disappear. That's your energy. You don't, that stuff doesn't linger around. That stuff is getting chewed up by cells right now because that's your preferred energy source. And your insulin level is low. You live a low insulin lifestyle. And that just takes you right back to where you are. And the rest of the world probably finds that nice sweet spot, which is it's carnivore. It's eating the right diet and fueling yourself properly just kind of blossoms into, I don't know, you want to call it side effects of a good, healthy diet? I mean, I'm 56. I've been paddleboarding for the last 10 years, and I've always asked myself this simple question. What diet gets the best speed? I mean, after all the other stuff, like the shape, your stroke, the shape of the board, the fin, the paddle, like all these other things, like what is going to get me to the finish line in the end? And I've been doing this for a while, and I never knew about this until so what I did is I started changing my diet first. I lost a bunch of weight. I was like 50 pounds heavier at least. And right around the same time that I started really walking the talk as a diabetes educator, and people can't relate to me, and I get it. I can't relate to them either. It's like, you're the diabetes educator. Are you going to go like do a class and then turn around and stuff your face with a bunch of pizza? You know, it's like, you have to walk the talk, right? No one can catch you at the donut shop, right? It's like, okay, well, I've been pretty much sentenced myself to eating a very low carbohydrate diet. But what I've fueled, and it's like, okay, how can I get better? How can I go longer? And I've never had, because when I was not a fat adapted athlete, I got into running. I was playing rugby, and I would train in my off days, and I would be doing stairs and all kinds of stuff. And I would bonk. I could bonk in the middle of a run and go, I'm done. I got to walk the rest of the way. And I even did it in a race. And I remember I couldn't make it to the finish line. It was so hard. So bonking was always that fearful, like, okay.
That's a runner's word for just crashing out, right? I've learned that
no
from
more,
listening to
yes, no more carbs left. You're like, that carb loading wasn't enough. I bonked. I don't have any, and I wasn't eating enough during the race. Is what it comes down to. You
and
went
those
too hard.
Little sugar gel things that they're all pounding because they think they just need to constantly refuel with sugar because they have to.
I don't know how they do that. Yes, and they're doing goos. You know what? I'll tell you. Like, I don't want to get it stuck in the middle of a lake because we do this paddle across Lake Tahoe, and it's like 22 miles, right? It takes a while.
Wow, that's a big paddle.
Yes, we do another one. I do one that is the Sundial Bridge along the Sacramento River in California to Red Bluffs, 55 miles, takes about 7.5 hours. And you got to do electrolytes. You're definitely doing electrolytes, but like, how much sugar do you need? I hate to say this, but I see those goos in the water. I see that stuff that doesn't belong in there. Okay. And they're really cranking up their carbs during that race. But, there's some really interesting study by Dr. Tim Noakes. So Noakes, Volek, D'Agostino, Fortnick. There's a couple of, in my world, the gurus of sports medicine, but they showed that there was no difference in sprint times of elite athletes when they did high carb versus low carb. But what's interesting is and I find this in athletes that I follow when I do coaching and with the CGM, about a third of them become pre-diabetic. So all that carb loading doesn't really pay off. So what I think is and again, this is just, it just adds to the mountain of evidence that you are sharing, which is what's the evidence for carnivore? Like, we never really were designed to have much carbohydrates in our diet, right?
Or any.
Makes sense. Or any,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, okay, I got fruit.
I'm sure you follow Bart
right,
K, right? Bart K always says the optimal amount of carbohydrates to consume in your entire lifetime is
Yes.
0. Not
Zero.
one ever.
Yes. Yeah. And I read that I want to say it was the 2005 ADA guideline that says the amount of carbohydrates necessary to sustain life is 0. And literally, like the next paragraph, it says, but we suggest the Mediterranean diet. You're like, what? What? How did you just about face that? Like, this makes no sense. Like, you printed it, and you thought that no one was going to notice it. Like, and there's just so much. That's, again, the mountain of evidence. But as an athlete, you go, okay, what determines my effort? And when you really think about it, it's do I have the blood glucose? So if my blood glucose to my brain drops, now the blood glucose is being supported during exercise by the liver. So the liver is releasing for the brain to uptake. So the brain doesn't drop your effort, because you were going to slow down if you don't have enough glucose. If the brain literally sees that threat, like, you got to slow down and let the glucose levels catch up a little bit. Let us basically unload the liver with what we have. And so what I've been looking at is like, what is my blood sugar response during races? And oh my gosh, it skyrockets. Certain types of exercise will really make your glucose level skyrocket, but it's for the brain, not for muscle uptake. So when you go through your first 45 minutes, it's all stored fat. An endurance athlete's fat adapted. He is very, very, very good at burning fat for energy. And you can measure this when you get your VO2 max. You can go to a DexaFit scan place or get your VO2 max, and you can see at what intensity, how intense can you go and still burn mostly fat? At what are you kicking out when your intensity is that of a sprint? Most high carb athletes, they will be utilizing glucose for energy at a much lower intensity. Mine is preserved. I'm hanging on to carbohydrates. I'm carbohydrate stingy. That's my sink. That's what absorbs that carbohydrates. It's just there because my muscles want to protect the rest of my body. My muscles are trying to prevent the toxicity associated with hyperglycemia. And when I exercise, wham, glucose is absorbed so rapidly. In athletes, after they do a carb load, after an exercise, they like improve that insulin sensitivity. Those GLUT4 transporters are right at the surface. You are going to absorb glucose so fast. That's the benefit of exercise. And if you look at what longevity is all about, what's longevity? VO2 max, muscle strength, muscle size. Those are all related to movement. You don't get those things without moving and increasing and improving insulin sensitivity. That is why people who exercise zone 2, I would say, and I look at paddleboarding as basically just like running, but I can do it all year long. All year long, I can do it without stressing my joints. This is swimming, essentially, but I'm out in nature. I am not being worried. I'm not worried about getting hit by a car. I'm not worried about somebody texting and driving. I'm not worried about
no sharks swimming around.
Oh, gosh, you know what? That would be a blessing to see a shark on a paddleboard. I've seen some cool stuff, and yeah, paddleboarding is just, that's peace. And so
I've only done it one time. It does look very peaceful and nice. Like I think I was doing it just on a really big surfboard. I think we were kind of jimmy rigging it to work, and so it was sort of a pain. It was not very peaceful.
Oh no, but it's like, it's amazing. Like, even at any age, you can dial in that balance. And what happens as we get older? We lose muscle mass, we lose our VO2 max, and we lose balance, our foot speed.
What is VO2 max? I don't know what that is.
That is this velocity, like how much oxygen, as well as, so how much are you burning? It's measuring oxygen consumption and carbon dioxide output.
Okay, so it's like a measure of
right,
things.
and it tells you what substrate you're using.
Oh, I see.
Right? So
Okay.
it can tell because when you burn fat, you're very efficient with oxygen and there's less carbon dioxide. It's a little bit more efficient. So based on the out product and with the in product, we know exactly what you're burning. Are you burning mostly carbs or are you burning mostly fat? It's a way of measuring, hey, how efficient am I at burning fat versus when do I cross over? There's a crossover point, which is where are you burning 50% carbs, 50% fat? And you want that intensity to be super high. Fat adapted athletes, that intensity is incredibly high before they start touching carbs. So you want to be these athletes in this study. This is interesting. There are some of them as high as 1.85 grams of fat per minute in their sprintings. But they were doing, in their sprints, they were doing 2x880s. So they're doing 2 laps as fast as they could. All right, these are sprint. These guys are heck of fast. And so you look at them and you go, all right, 1.85. It's just like 1.5 grams per minute of fat. We'll do some math. This is 900 grams of fat. This is like 1,000 calories an hour. Try to burn 1,000 calories an hour. You are going to be sprinting literally for 1 hour. And that whole time, that's how efficient and how good they are at burning fat for energy. They're completely fat adapted. They don't need carbs. As we know, we don't need carbs for sprinting. That's what I've been out to prove. Like, this bro science, you guys,
or any explosive exercise. Like
yes,
because that's why I always hear
sprints.
People say like, "Oh, I need carbs because I'm doing, like my deadlift today, or I'm doing some
my
really
resistance training,
explosive exercise." They think that gives them a boost, and I'm curious of your thoughts on that, because I don't understand the bodily systems well enough to fully refute if there is some benefit to like having a few berries before like a big, squat max or something. That doesn't do anything for you. It's just a total farce.
You're not going to all of a sudden your muscles just suck up some carbohydrates that are absolutely essential, right? It's already stored. The glycogen is already stored. How long is it going to take for you to absorb that, right? Then the other thing is like, okay, so when you're exercising, you're in a catabolic mode, right? Insulin levels are low. Why would you want to spike it? Why would you want to spike insulin and put your body into a storage mode when you're trying to get into a fat burning mode, right? Which means insulin would need to be low. So a Gatorade or some sort of sugar would raise up that insulin and kick you out of fat burning mode. You just changed metabolic fueling like real quick. You now just made the body very dependent upon carbohydrates for energy because you just spiked your glucose level. I can't think of anything worse. We should be exercise fasted every single time. That's the whole idea. And do you think about what you're doing? Okay, so when you exercise in the morning, you're already fasted during your exercise. You've been fasting all night, so you don't have much glycogen storage. I mean, this carbohydrate storage, just in general, just think about this. How stupid this is. 400 grams, right? 454 grams is a pound. You don't even have a pound of carbohydrates, right? You don't even store a pound of carbohydrates, right? That pound is worth half the energy. It's not worth very much. So it's 1,600 calories. You multiply it by 4. It's really not very much. It's not as dense as fat. Like carbohydrates is what? 4 calories per gram. Here's fat over here. It's at 10 calories essentially per gram. So it's incredibly more dense in the form of energy. You're carrying less than a pound of carbs, but you're carrying 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds of fat. How in the world would we think that the carb tank needs to be filled 3 times a day, right? And hundreds of grams of carbohydrates. And we're suggesting that this is 60 to 70% of your calories every single day, right? This is when I was in the hospital, I called it constant carbs. They said it was consistent carbs. Like, no, diabetic does not need 250 grams of carbohydrates per day, and it's not going to help him heal. But
the letters are close, but the meaning is different. I like your term much better.
Yes, it's ridiculous. Why do we do this? So that if you think about like, okay, so the fat there's an abundance of it. What stops us from burning that is just that. It's the carbs. Get rid of the carbs, and you unlock basically your fat cells to be able to just pop open and just start wasting energy. I mean, just like it's just spewing it out. Like, when you're in carnivore, you're like constant ketosis. You're wasting like 300 calories in your breath and in your urine every day. Like, just keep on breathing, people. Just keep that insulin down and keep breathing. And you will force your body into this fat burning mode. You are making these muscles during that exercise dependent upon fat for energy instead of carbs. It's like when you're not training, you're really training because you're trying to become more fat adapted. You're trying to increase beta oxidation. You're trying to increase fat oxidation even at super high intensity. So being a fat adapted athlete, so being in a ketogenic state, lifting heavy or exercising, doing that exercise, making the body, force the body to utilize fat for energy during that exercise, wherever it was, explosive as it was, or as enduring as it was, like, so you're doing a zone 2 type exercise, you're still making these muscles very dependent upon fat for energy, not carbs. Then after your exercise, wait a while. You're not hungry anyways. There's no point in trying to stuff something down your mouth. Besides, the next meal you get, no matter when it is, after that exercise, you will have maximum protein absorption. You will have maximum amino acid absorption. And if you want maximum amino acid absorption, protein synthesis, muscle synthesis, it's pretty clear that if you want muscle tissue, you need to eat muscle tissue. The only way you're going to gain that muscle that you did it for a reason, right? You stimulate it. You're trying to stimulate some sort of adaptive response when you do your exercise. Hopefully you're hitting it hard every once in a while. And so that stimulation of that adaptive response, you want to maximize that. And the only way to maximize is how it was created in the first place, which is fat and protein on a 1-to-1 ratio. That fat helps that protein absorption. That's killer. That is so critically important. So when I hear people go, yeah, I have 2 eggs. That's all I ever eat in the morning. I'm like, man, what is wrong with you? I worked with a doctor that would tell patients, oh my gosh, don't eat more than 2 eggs a week. And I just want to cry. Like, what are you doing? So when I was at this diabetes clinic, patient would go in there, have a meeting with a doctor. She'd come out and say, Kyle, I want to start insulin or something like that. And I'd be like, nope. Boom, get in the room. What can I do? I got 2 patients behind you. I got to hustle here, but I got 15 minutes to convince you that what you're doing is wrong and that I can get you off of the medications. Let me train you. Let me teach you. Let me coach you using a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor. I'll get it for free because we had a grant. We would do that, right? So they would get this monitor, and if I could get them to go, that makes sense. Depending on the person. Some of these engineers are so smart. So they will pick it up and go, oh, that makes total sense. And they'll come back next month or so, and they're like, yeah, my A1C is, 6.2 now. I'm not diabetic anymore. I'm off the insulin. Yeah, I just listened to what you said. Yeah, that was great. Fantastic. And that's all they needed. They needed a 10-minute discussion. Then there's those that want to, they need more coaching. They need more encouragement. Right. And I still have these friends, these wonderful people that I got to meet through the diabetes clinic. But we needed a gong because everybody was losing weight. Everybody was reversing their diabetes. They had record breaking metrics that particular quarter. And I'm like, okay, I knew it worked before. I know that it works, but it doesn't work, unfortunately, in a health system that is sponsored by industry. So it's like, the nutritional guidelines for the hospital says something completely different from what I want to say, right? Like, these people need to be offered some alternative to what you're giving them, which is just plates and trays full of sugar. And it's like every meal, it seemed like, oh, they're in the kitchen there going, more carbs. All right. Give me more of that. Hey, we need more of these tangerines on here. More fruit. Oh, 2 more puddings on this person, right? They're trying to get the grams of carbs up. And I'm like, this is so crazy. You guys I've brought this up to administration multiple times. Like, hey, what would it take to allow CGMs in the hospital. Yes, if you're doing an MRI, it's a bad idea. We'll just rip it out. We'll put a new one in. Not a big deal. But the money saved and the lives saved with a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor for a patient in the hospital is amazing. Not to mention, hey, this is a great opportunity for learning. They're a captive audience. They can't go anywhere, right? I can lecture to them and they can't leave, right? So utilizing that technology would save, the person that gets transferred out of the ICU. Next thing you know, they're on the ward, and there wasn't a information exchange of how much insulin they got. And next thing, or they skipped a meal or something happened. Yeah, heaven forbid if they skipped a bunch of carbs on their tray, because you know what they do is they say, they give it a percentage. Like, here's your tray, and you ate X percentage, 25%. I'm like, well, that percentage is really important to me. Like, what did they eat? Did they eat just the carbs, or did they eat just the meat? Because we can't give them the same dose of insulin. And that's all they do in the hospital. We're doing finger sticks and chasing glucose. This is just insane. And then what happens is, and I've had this quite a few times in my support group, where a patient would leave the hospital with insulin, and that's how they were maintained. Years go by. They're still on that insulin. And the dose has gone up. They're not on 10 units of Lantus anymore. They're on 20, 30, 40, right? And they put on a bunch of weight. They're like, man, I just thought that, like, yeah, because when you went to the doctor, he assumed that you had your education. He assumed that you've already been tried with lifestyle modification as well as metformin, and that never happened because they got started in the hospital. That is how we fix insulin resistance in the hospital. We use insulin. And it's almost impossible to get around that without changing the diet. You could do it if you change the diet. I would be all for that. But they're giving them, hundreds of grams of carbohydrates a day. They're giving glucose for a glucose problem, and these people are getting started on insulin, and the dose always goes up. This is insulin resistance, essentially. It's really simple. They always start off on 10, and they never go down. They always go up. So the dose starts at 10, long acting, and you can start this when their A1C is 9. You're supposed to give them education. The education is horrible because they're teaching ADA and AACE guidelines, which are all polluted. So here's an example. They think that saturated fat causes diabetes. And when I remember studying for one of their exams, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I can't have any part of this. I can never be a part of this. I'm never going to answer this question correctly. I'm never going to answer that, if they even say like, there's scientific evidence that is absolute that shows that saturated fat intake increases diabetes. I'm like, I've got to leave this group. I can never be associated with these people. So that was definitely my departure from all the guidelines. I'm like, okay, this is stupid. I can't even, this isn't something that I need in my life, is saying that I have these credentials. I'm the so-called expert because I listen to the ADA or the current guidelines that just hurt people, like literally just hurt people. You put them on insulin, they put them on, or that typical one, after they put them on insulin and they don't get the response, they started putting them on basal and bolus. So before you know, these people are on hundreds of units of insulin every day, and there is no end in sight. And what's going to kill them? It's not going to be diabetes. It's going to be the effects of it. It's going to be cardiovascular disease. We think that we've solved all the world's problems by putting them on a statin and say, oh, they never had a heart attack. I've seen plenty of people have strokes and heart attacks on a statin. I don't know. I look at cholesterol very differently because of people that you and I both follow. They have spoken very readily against statin use. This is crazy. It's such an important, cholesterol is so vitally important, and seeing the neurological side effects of statins, and I think, for what freaking copay? What are you getting out of this? Really? This is okay with you? I mean, there is something that I think we should all just think of this study where you had a third of the patients in this run-in period that dropped out. You should scratch your head really hard on that. These people were going to get paid. They wanted to be in the study. They signed up for the study. Whatever the hell, I don't know, $1,000. I want the money. But why would a third of them just drop out? And they don't say why. Hey, the side effects were so bad that 30% of them couldn't tolerate it. Yeah, they shouldn't be in the study, but you sure as hell need to include what happened. Give us the details, please. But you can't get it. You cannot get the details. That is locked up by, I think it's the, is it the DCCT? Cholesterol Trialist Association. I forget the name of it, but there is an association. Sir Rory Collins, who has the data of those original studies, and they will not share for third-party evaluation. So we got to do our own. But I can just tell you, as a pharmacist, the people that I would, consultation. Kyle, I need a consultation. They're like, as a pharmacist, you're doing this all day. I see a lot of it. I say, hey, do you have difficulties remembering where you parked your car? Do you remember difficulties remember where you put your keys? Like, do you feel like foggy, like it's not clear in your head, like you can't get some words out that you want to get out? These are side effects that you're dealing with that is completely unnecessary. And throwing women, that is just a shame. Saying that men and women are the same and they just are along for the ride, that's not really fair. I mean, you're increasing the risk of diabetes by putting women on statins. So what happened first? Your LDL went up. You could have no metabolic syndrome, but if we found that your LDL was elevated, we could put you on a statin, and guess what? We could create metabolic syndrome in you. I mean, you think about the role of cholesterol in a very basic way, and you can see why it increased the risk of diabetes by over 70%. Like these cholesterol rafts give the membrane of cells the rigidity. So receptors can stand erect like they should. Say an insulin receptor. Not to mention they're actually in a hole, kind of like in a cave, on the outside of a cell. And if that's not sitting straight up, what are you going to do? It's laying down on its side. You don't have proper insulin signaling, and that receptor isn't working properly, right? The fact that we're making it worse, but the fact that we've thrown women in and said that they're the same, it's like this estrogen is really a big deal. This is a really big deal. And to say that we handle cholesterol the same, it's so not true. Just look at the difference and just guidelines even. I mean, just simplified, say, what is the ideal HDL for a man versus the woman? It's different. We're different. We should never assume that we're the same. Estrogen raises that HDL. Man doesn't get that benefit. HDL is lower in men. And I love this because this happens all the time. I'll have a patient in the ICU, high triglyceride, low HDL, and I'll say, hey, doc, do you know how to raise that HDL? No. Like, the best statin, I think, might raise it by like 5-10% or some stupid number. But it's like, you know how to raise it and really make it go up. You eat more saturated fat. That is how I hate to say it, but it's cheese. Cheese will make your HDL, the good cholesterol, rise. And it's a beautiful thing. And it will drop those triglycerides. And they look at you like you're from another planet. And they just sit there and just kind of laugh at you. During COVID, I would trust me, I loved getting lipid panels during COVID. I'm looking at these LDLs and oh my gosh, these people on statins, their LDL is really low. This is putting them at risk for infections. I've seen young people with LDLs that have been pushed into the 20s and 30s, and you're wondering why they have a raging cellulitis. You have no immune system. You have a way of fighting off an infection. And I would contrast that to a young man that I met in the hospital. He was losing his toe. And we worked together with his continuous glucose monitor. And he actually was able to reverse his diabetes and deal with this osteomyelitis, this bone infection. I mean, typically, if you're stressed and you have an infection, your blood sugars go through the roof. That is a stress response. Your blood sugar will go from 100 to 200. That's normal stress response to like an infection, COVID, whatever, stress, mental, emotional stress, right? It will skyrocket. he was able to bring his blood sugar down while he was fighting off something that was pushing it up just by learning about food. I'm like, you know what? That guy is not going to lose another toe. This is this is really, really important stuff. And if you really want to have, to me, it's like, how can I, and I'm sure like you as well, how can I have a maximum benefit on this community, this world in which we live, right? How can I pay this forward? And that's basically what I've been doing. That's my return on investment. When people come back and they go, hey, I'm off my medications. I reversed my diabetes. My doctor says, whatever I'm doing, keep it up. He doesn't necessarily want to know what you're doing, but he's like, whatever you're doing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. After a while, you got to admit these doctors must be scratching their head going, gosh, what's up with this keto stuff? Hey, that's another carnivore patient that did really well, and they're no longer my patient. I mean, they've got to be. Actually, I worked with
they all start disappearing.
Yes, all the patients but in the end, I had the doctor that I was working with in the diabetes clinic come and stay in the room with me to listen to my little rants, my curbside consults, and he was like, telling me should I put a CGM on? Unfortunately, when you hire a dietitian, and this is where it gets difficult, it's like, how do you bridge that gap between, and how do you convince administration as well as a dietitian that's true blue with what they know, and convince them that they're wrong and say, hey, this is the way that we've been doing, this is what works. It is very difficult because you're asking them to about face on their education. And that's the humble part that everyone, that's the sad part. That is the part that is going to drive this much longer. But at the same time, this could also really accelerate it. The more physicians that you can influence, the more physicians that you can, or practitioners or whoever, the more that you can share, the more streamlined, the more willing that people will be to share. Say, hey, I got this one patient that. What I love, I'll be honest, the one that is, and then I've been working with a couple of them, especially recently, is the autoimmune disease. The autoimmune disease that disappears. I don't know what it rate, and that's what I'm really interested in, but it disappears. And it's really, really cool to have someone go from basically a life sentence of pain, horrible arthritis, leaky gut, immune systems. I mean, they can hardly move, right? Their lifestyle is so restricted because of this condition, and really because of food. They got to let their gut heal. And the fact that you are reversing autoimmune disease through a diet, it puts such a different twist on what really is a progressive death sentence. Inflammatory bowel, Crohn's, eczema, arthritis, psoriasis, Hashimoto's.
I just met someone a couple days ago with ulcerative colitis too. I mean, all those gut things. It's such a crime to label all those issues you just listed as like a disease. It's just, it's because you're poisoning yourself. And this is like the dark part of the conditioning everyone's gotten, is just this whole, even the word autoimmune, and just this idea that, oh yeah, some people's bodies just destroy themselves. That's normal. That's not normal.
Genetic.
It's genetic. You're unlucky. That's not normal at all. It's normalized because so many people have this problem, but everyone's sort of conditioned together just to believe that this is a thing. Yeah. And they're not looking at the fact that humanity, we have been around for so long. We've evolved through so much, and we've got to where we are today and made it through all those hard times because we have really, really good, a heck of a computer here doing all this. And it's really, if we would have just had these random autoimmune diseases pop up throughout our history, we would have been gone. This is how evolution works, is that the fact that we exist today means that it works really well. You just have to not put poison in the system and it will do its job the way it's supposed to.
Right. There's a reason why we gravitate for certain foods, and why bitterness is bad, right? It's poison. I think of the Cleavers. Ward and June Cleaver. This dates me, but it was the Leave It to Beaver show, and I think, man, they were always super skinny. They always were. They never got big. And I think if they could see us then, what we look like now, they'd be like, did you guys change species? Like, what's going on? Imagine them going to the beach with us now and going, what happened to you guys? What'd you do? Like, what did you like? This isn't normal. This is not how we looked. And like, if you look at the 1950s, everyone was at total six packs, and they weren't even
Yeah,
exercising.
even like the
Nobody
70s,
went.
80s, 90s. Like honestly,
Yeah, we
those
looked
beach
so
pictures
much
you look
better.
at, people were everyone at the beach was hot,
Yeah,
like, and this is just,
that's
and
what I tell people.
I was gonna
I'm
say
trying to
I
get.
come back like twice a year to America right now. I do a lot of traveling, so I go to
Oh, where
Mexico,
are
I go
you?
to South America. I was living in Colombia for like 6 months out of the last couple of years,
Very
and
cool.
so I come visit home here. I'm here right now in Washington State visiting family.
Okay.
About twice a year is my rate of coming back to visit the U.S. So it really gives me a unique perspective on how people are changing over time. Because if you're here every day walking through the mall like weekly, it's so gradual you don't really see the difference. But I can see the difference in a big way. It
So what
literally,
do you see? I'm curious.
oh, I mean, every single time I come back, it's like the percentage of people who are overweight or just inflamed is just,
Yeah.
it's almost nobody
Yeah.
is looking actually metabolically healthy out there. It's almost impossible to find people who look like they are actually doing well, and it's
And if you do,
tough.
you're like, whoa, hey, you. Let me talk to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Something's different about you. Talk to me. Yeah. Oh, another tribal member
Hmm.
dislocated.
And I'm from the Northwest, so I'm from Washington State, and there's certain towns. There's one place called Bellingham that I just, me and my family went up to for hiking recently. I'm not sure if you've been up to Washington at all. I know you're a West Coaster, but this
Well,
is
I've done the Columbia River.
okay. Yeah, yeah, cool.
Yeah, the
But
gorge.
yeah, I mean, this is like plant-based mecca of the world right here. Pretty much the whole coast is. So when I go up to this town Bellingham, which you walk down the street, every single store is like vegan this, vegan that, fruit bowls, acai, coffee
Yeah.
shops. There's no meat anywhere to be found. Like they're completely plant-based everything, and you can just tell that everyone is bloated and inflamed, and just their skin is discolored, their hair is frail. It's, you can see all of the things that we now know is because they're just full of plant toxins. They're not getting any of the healthy proteins and fats, and it's really rough to watch because these people are trying to do the right thing. They're trying to be healthy, and they're all sort of
Yeah.
convincing themselves in the same matrix that they're living in that they are healthy,
Yep.
because there's such an ideological drive there, and it's
So,
really tough to break through to these people and find an opening to try to plant the seed of knowledge, of enlightenment. And like
that's the
you,
challenge.
yeah, and like you, I cannot keep my mouth shut. I think we're similar. Just
Yeah.
2 days ago, there was this little festival downtown in my hometown here of Coopville and Woodby Island. It's the Arts and Crafts Festival, and there's a bunch of booths out. There was this booth that was it was like soap and beeswax and skin balm and stuff, and there was a lady there who was getting like a CBD oil or something, and she was asking the 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 cash register gal, is this going to help my arthritis? Because she has really bad arthritis. And so I was like, oh, my ears perked up. I'm like looking for some soap, but I just heard someone mention that they have something that I know I can fix for them, just with something like real. And so I kind of like, just kept shopping for my soap. I waited until she walked out, and I intercepted. I went in and I told her, hey,
Yeah.
I heard that you mentioned you had this issue. Would you be open to an idea? I've actually met a lot of people and made a lot of friends. I have a podcast. I talk to people about this, and I've talked to people, which is true, that have fixed this, but it's going to take, a fairly interesting shift in your diet. And she was totally open to it. And I gave her the full, like, 5-10 minute spiel about the plant toxins, the oxalates are gathering around your joints. You know,
Yeah.
plants are trying to kill you. Here's Anthony Chafee video saved on her phone. Just give her, like, just a quick rant about that. And she was
Uh,
stoked about it. She was like, and she was like 60 years old, boomer. And she was like so happy that, someone had an idea, because she was in that window of desperation. And You don't go up to like a soap store asking for help with your arthritis unless you're like in really trying to find a
Right.
solution to this thing. So you just have to find those people, and sometimes it's hidden under a layer where they aren't going to tell you straight up, and they're not going to talk about. They don't want to talk about it, but they're. What I'm trying to get at is for the people out there who are like scared to mention this to people, they think it's awkward or something. There are so many people that are actually looking for solutions, and if you
Yeah.
can come in there and, like you say, get them to the point of saying, "Oh, that makes sense." Those are the beautiful
Yes.
words you want to
That's the
hear.
key.
And
Yep.
really just talking about how plants actually work in nature. They don't
Yeah.
want to be eaten. They fill themselves with defense chemicals that give you problems.
Hmm.
Those defense chemicals and the oxalates and the leptins, those screw
Yep.
everything up from a cellular level and will manifest as all these problems that people have, the autoimmune diseases, like you said. And
Right.
I really just think the word disease is basically a scam at this point. After I've heard so many stories, like these are just poisoning effects. Like it should be
Yeah.
extremely rare for people to have chronic diseases. Maybe very rare
Oh.
genetic anomalies, but it's so common
Or a
now, and this is not
toxicity to
correct.
something in the environment.
Yeah,
Yeah, like some sort of smoke or yeah, something like that. Oh, I love that. You know,
it feels so good. It's the best
it
feeling
doesn't
ever
it?
to get someone even to start thinking differently,
Right. Right.
because you know that there are so many people out there that want to fix their issues, and you
Yeah.
just got to find those people. And there's this quote or some meme that says, "It's not our job to awaken all the sheep; it's our job to awaken the sleeping lions." And so we have to find those people that are
Oh,
trying to find the
that are the
solution and
sleeping
going for
lions.
it. I love that quote.
I
Yeah.
love.
hmm
That is really good. Yeah, it's like, but you're onto it, and this is something I've been wanting to do, and that is like, where are people the most motivated? I kind of think the gym. So hang out at the gym, creep on them, and say, "Hey, aren't you frustrated? This is going nowhere, right? Are you like, how would you're going to go home and you may completely undo everything you just did? You know, have you thought about using a continuous glucose monitor? Have you thought about being coached so you can actually see what your foods do? Because we're just guessing, right? Those people that are in the right mindset, and I don't like it. Like you have the right attitude. I love how you've. I think you have a sense of responsibility for the
Oh yeah.
knowledge that you've gained. Yeah,
Once we've
it
gained
doesn't
this
come
knowledge,
without it.
it's our duty as like good human beings to share this with our people and help people out. Like
Right.
to know this, all that we know now, and to stay quiet is completely out of the question, in my opinion.
Yeah, you're bearing your talent, right? Yeah, it's finding people where they are, but I think you're totally right, and that takes courage and being bold and opening your damn mouth and saying, you know what? And this is what started me on this direction in the first place was that you've got something of value that would help people. You owe it to your patients. You owe it and to yourself to be in this niche and growing, right? I get to grow. I get to be here. I get to share. So yeah, I've approached strangers in just strangest places. The gym though seems to be the best place. Especially, you know what you should do is like know where in the gym that they have that stupid metric. It says, right, total calories that you burn. It says grams of carbohydrates that you've burned since you started. I'm like, this is the most ridiculous metric. How do you know me? Like, how do you know anything about me? So if I go home and I've done 45 minutes on the treadmill and I see that I get, I don't know, it probably says like I 75 grams of carbs that I just burned. Well, I'm just gonna go get those.
I don't know if
You
I've
know?
seen that. I've always seen like a little calorie counter. Do they have that now? Like
No,
carb
it has
counter?
it has grams of carbs. Grams of carbs.
What?
Yeah, it's like you need that. Like, oh, you know what? I had a really good one that I saw at the gym yesterday, and I took a picture of it, and then it was
Yeah,
quite
let's see it.
bothersome. Let's see. It was what was the picture of? An extra 20 minutes is an extra. You can see that.
Yeah, what does it say? I can't quite read it. Oh, is it like a something on the wall, like a poster on the wall?
It's a beer. An extra
No
20
way.
minutes gets me an extra beer. Yeah,
That's posted in the gym.
In the gym, it says 20 minutes equals an extra, and it's a beer, and it says #worth it. Really? I go to the gym because I drink. That makes absolutely no sense.
That poster encapsulates my entire college experience, actually. Because when I was in college, I completely believed, I can eat any of the garbage. I can go ham on this keg tonight if I just work out for like 2.5 hours today.
Like that'll do it. Yeah. And did you ever get the 2.5 hours in?
Oh, right? We had probably more. Like I just went down to this. So I went to the University of Washington. There's this like huge, awesome gym there. So I would just kind of rotate around the weight room and the basketball court, and I could do all that stuff. And partly because I was just so young is because I was just able to. But I really just thought the more hours, the better. I had not watched any of the Mike Mentzer videos. You've heard of Mike Mentzer?
Oh, yes.
That's an interesting rabbit hole. I haven't really gone super far down, but the gist of it for listeners is that this guy was a big-time bodybuilder back in the Arnold Schwarzenegger days. Those two guys were like always competing, and Mentzer's ideology or the routine he followed was in the message he spread for many years after his career was over was that people need shorter workouts and more break days. People are working out too long and not giving themselves break days, and you need those break days to build the muscle. You need to give the muscles time to rebuild themselves, and people aren't doing enough of that. So he was preaching like your workout shouldn't be longer than 45 minutes, and then take 2 days or 3 days off. And that's what he gave, and I'm very curious to try that out myself. I still need to get back into a solid gym routine to try this, but it makes sense.
Dr. McGuff, another one. He does, I think, 5 different exercises to complete failure.
Oh, that's the most important part that I forgot. Like Mentzer said, you always go to failure. Always, every single exercise is to failure. Mm-hmm.
Right. And he's totally right. You don't need to be doing like so much volume. So what I have found is that paddleboarders that do a lot of like distances. Our races are 5-10 miles, right? They can be distances, right? So people are doing this pretty moderate intensity for long periods of time and never really looking at their recovery parameters. Like I use an Oura ring. I have ways of measuring my HRV. I know this is on the wrong finger, but knowing what your HRV is really important. Like this is the metric. What's my readiness? How well did I sleep last night? Like, what's my number? Like, okay, is today the day that I should hit it hard? Am I fully recovered? Am I still sore? Right? Why are you keep pushing yourself so hard and too much moderate intensity for too long? You should go zone 5 and recover. So get on the treadmill, just do 10 sprints and go as hard as you can, 30 seconds, maybe a minute, right? Jump off the treadmill, get your heart rate. Let the thing go. Don't worry. Get your heart rate. See what you're starting at, whatever that number is, and then see how long it takes you to get back to your start, which for me would be like 110, 120, right? When do I feel like I'm ready to go again? How long does it take to go from your max heart rate back down to a lower heart rate? What is that time frame? Really is your fitness level. That's kind of your VO2 max. How quickly can I recover? And it's something very easy to measure just on any plain old treadmill. Like, okay, it took me 1 beat for every minute I'm dropping by 30, or every minute I'm dropping by 20. I want to increase that. Every minute I want to drop by 40, right? I'm trying to get to my very quick recovery range. The only way to do that is to do super high intensity, get those lungs burning, and then back off.
That's a really good idea. That's something I should try to do, because
just measure it. You have a number.
I've always had a little bit of a weirdly high heart rate, like my whole life. I've always kind of measured it, and it was always kind of high on that chart. I was like, that's weird. I feel like I'm pretty healthy. I'm eating well, I'm exercising, but like the heart rate's pretty high. So that's something I should look into, and other people should too. That's good data to have.
Right. When your heart rate variability, so heart rate variability is this the balance of these two nervous systems, autonomic and so the sympathetic and parasympathetic. Parasympathetic is relaxation. It's going to slow your heart rate down. Sympathetic is going to accelerate. So what's the balance between those two? Well, when you have a lot of parasympathetic with the more of the relaxation, which is what you want to enhance and increase, your HRV number will go up. Otherwise, it's a very low number. Like if it's low, you know, you're too much sympathetic tone, the difference between these two nervous systems. So if there's a more relaxation phase, more parasympathetic, that there'll be a longer span between each beats, and it's measuring the span between each beats. Your heart rate variability is how much is it fluctuating. The more it fluctuates, the better your balance is between these two nervous systems, the sympathetic, fight or flight, and the parasympathetic, which is sleep, sex, hunger, like slowing things down, getting you ready for slowing your heart rate. The other thing you can do is, you ever notice, like when you breathe out a lot, you have deeper breaths. That's more parasympathetic. That'll slow your heart rate down. But if you hyperventilate, that increases your sympathetic tone, right? So it's the balance. The HRV is the balance of those two. So when you're fully recovered, that HRV number will be higher, will be nice and high, like as high as you can get it. Everyone's different as far as their heart rate variability, but you want that number to be like 100 milliseconds. So try to get that number up as high as possible. And you know, hey, my HRV is really high today. That means I got a lot of good rest. I'm ready to hit it hard. I'm fully recovered. Let's go, right? Andy, is it Gilpin? I think it's Andy Gilpin, goes into a lot of these metrics about HRV. He looks at respiratory rate. He looks at body temperature, overnight body temperature. So he looks at a lot of metrics and determines like, okay, is this the right environment that you're sleeping in? You need to change your environment. You need to change your exercise routine. How can we optimize your performance as an athlete based on metrics, right? So knowing what knowing what to look for. Man, I'll tell you, an athlete, when it comes to their blood glucose, when you use a continuous glucose monitor, man, their blood sugar is quite low, incredibly low. And I had no idea, even on myself, when I do my own experiments, that I'm into the 40s and 50s at night. And that's one question I get from diabetics when I first get them on there. Usually within a short period of time, they ask me, they're like, do I need to eat before I go to bed because my blood sugar gets so low at night? I'm like, no. This is my favorite phone call that I get from you when you go, do I need to eat because my blood sugar my alarms are going off. I'm 55 at night. I'm like, no. You should never have to eat before you go to bed. But, you know, the medical institution would say anything less than 60, you're hypoglycemic, you have a problem. And I'm going, wait a minute, I'm in the 40s and 50s all night. Like I might average 60s, 70s all day because I'm, you know, eating an appropriate diet, a carnivore diet. Well, you know what? I'll be honest. On a CGM, a carnivore diet takes the cake when it comes to the boringest thing to ever watch. I mean, grass grow, paint dry. I mean, it is just, I wouldn't know if you ate. I'd have to ask you, did you eat today? And I'd be surprised. I mean, I wouldn't even know because it's just flat. You're not bouncing. You're not doing anything. Your glucose variability. Now, this is a really important metric on the CGM. So I look at all these things. How much are you going up and down? How much are you fluctuating? When I first get them and I let them experiment on anything you want, try all your foods. I want you to learn. Try your favorite creamer. Try this. Try that. Try sweet potato versus regular potato. Try brown rice. Whatever. Just try it, right? And you watch their variability is like 25, 30%. And they're fluctuating. They're going like this. And sometimes they're fluctuating and they're not eating anything. Very trippy. But in a very short period of time, and they typically do the right thing, that blood sugar flattens out. And it is flat as can be. It looks like asystole. There's
when
no
they go
bumps.
carnivore, you mean? And they cut
when
that
they
stuff
go
out?
carnivore, when they start eating properly, it is the flattest line. It is so boring. And exercise, that could be interesting. Exercise could bump you if you sprinted, and it could drop you if you did some cardio. So after obviously a high carb meal, it'd be good to go on a walk and try to lower your blood sugar. So
that's super interesting. And this is kind of what I was going to ask you earlier, just from a standpoint of, I would love to, just like a walkthrough. What happens when you put something in your mouth? Is it as simple as, you chew it up, you masticate, it goes into your body, and it basically just breaks down into those substrates, the carbs, fats, and proteins. And or maybe more, you'd make it more specific, like, all the carbohydrates then break down into fructose and glucose. And so this is what I try to get through people's minds, and you can correct me here if I'm missing any parts to it, but essentially it doesn't matter if you're eating, a Kit Kat bar or a bowl of oatmeal or a loaf of bread or a fruit or a vegetable. Every single carbohydrate breaks down into sugar, and that's going to spike that insulin, because when you consume sugar, your body says, what the heck, I have the perfect amount of glucose here from gluconeogenesis I'm already making myself. I don't want any more. And so it has to recruit that insulin to come basically beat it down to get back down to the level it wants. And I'm curious of your more refined take on what happens when you're eating those things. Is that roughly accurate?
Yeah, but we should probably use the word blood glucose.
Okay.
Can you say, oh, the carbohydrates converted into sugar? Sugar, like, that's a tough one. So to be like super specific, say starches, carbohydrates are simplest little molecules of glucose.
Right.
So
it's all glucose. So glucose is just a more scientific
glucose.
term.
It would be, we commonly interchange it as blood sugar. But then I think we should use fructose and just be super specific and just say, well, this is blood glucose. When you eat sugar, I'm only going to see half of it on your CGM. So I don't see fructose, which is something another sensor will have eventually. There's a couple of them: uric acid, ketones, ethanol. Like I can't wait to see the sensors, because we're going to continue.
Because then people realize that fruit is poisoning them. They don't understand.
Right. But man, you open up a whole lot of Pandora's box. This is fun. I love talking about this stuff because we talked about fructose, right? So if I gave you straight sugar, it's a disaccharide, glucose and fructose together. I only see the glucose. So a cookie,
that's like table sugar, right? Just like a spoonful.
Table sugar.
Yeah.
Pure, white, and deadly. It's refined sugar that doesn't exist in nature. It's manufactured. It's purified. It's Coke. For me as a kid, that's what it was. I want to get hyper and I love it, and let's just go, right? But it also is incredibly addictive. But so as soon as something sweet hits your tongue, this is important that people understand. Like when you get sweetness on the tongue, you're releasing insulin. So your diet soda causes you to release insulin. You're prepping your body for food. And you think about insulin like on a very microscopic level. You think about a cell, and cells don't have eyeballs. They're just existing in this liquid medium, right? They have no idea what's going on around them till insulin shows up. Insulin says, okay, everybody, construction crew, show up, all right? Everything's there. Let's just start building. Let's make it bigger, right? No repair going on. It's just building. It's making a bigger cell. It's starting to store energy. It's storing fat. Totally storing fat. It's taking extra glucose, converting it as fat within the cell. Insulin is inhibiting the fat breakdown through an enzyme system. Its role is to shut off fat burning. So you start thinking about, okay, man, do I ever want my insulin level spiked? Do I really want to turn off fat burning mode? Do I want my cells to see insulin and start building and start increasing anabolism? Really, really important that we understand insulin as the anabolic hormone. That is the most potent way to build stuff. And that's how you got to be this size. Puberty, same thing with a woman when she's pregnant, right? She has to build the baby. She has to become insulin resistant in order to grow. So that is a growth that you should think about as you get older. Like, I don't want really to grow, but it does a lot of amazing things to help with muscle and help repair growth when insulin signaling is ideal. But when insulin resistance shows up, all this kind of gets thrown out. Like you don't get the anabolic effect of insulin on muscle and bone. And so what are you going to do if you're not building muscle and bone and helping with repair of that? You're not going to keep your muscle and bone. You're going to become frail. You're going to have sarcopenia, osteopenia, right? You're dwindling away after the age of 30. You need to increase muscle strength because that's going to increase longevity, right? So when you eat something, carb, protein, or fat, if you eat carbohydrates, you're going to spike insulin. So those, as soon as that carbohydrate hits your tongue, insulin is released, is now absorbed. The absorption, the rate of absorption has everything to do with how pure it is. So if it's a refined carbohydrate, it is like liquid. Like bread is like liquid glucose. You might as well drink one of those oral glucose tolerance tests, 75 grams of just straight, not very tasty, not very sweet, actually, glucose. Put power that, right? Sticky as hell. But anyways, that if you have fiber in it, like you would with, say, oatmeal, you mentioned oats, or rice or something like that. So the refinement determines how rapidly it goes into your bloodstream. Oatmeal won't go in as rapidly, but if you look at the area under the curve of that oatmeal on the continuous glucose monitor, it's big. It's like a potato. So your blood sugar will be elevated for a significant period of time. If you eat the refined carbohydrates, you have a spike and then you have a drop. Let's talk about the spike. Spike is wicked. Spike makes proteins stickier. These are advanced glycation end products. Small blood vessels in your eyeballs, kidneys, nerves. This is the effect.
Your dick, bros. Like if you have erectile dysfunction problems, that's like, aren't your eyes and your dick like the two things that go out first when you have these issues?
Very small little blood vessels. They're going to get damaged. So like, I mean, men are afraid to talk about this, but not only that, but their testosterone levels are lower. If you're overweight, like I was, you have higher than normal estrogen levels. And that's not helping balance out your testosterone. That's putting things in the wrong balance here. And it's coming from your fat cells. That estrogen is being secreted by fat cells and lowering your testosterone. So now you have less testosterone in relation to estrogen. That's certainly affecting you as well. Not to mention, like, the origin of testosterone is cholesterol. Statins will destroy the testosterone that you're producing, and that just compounds all these problems. But we think we need a drug. But anyways, where was I? Okay, so we were talking about when we eat protein and fat together. So we talked about, okay, carbohydrates, the rapid spike. So you think about what insulin's job is to do. Like if let's say you take in, say, 75 grams of carbs, your blood sugar will go from 100 to 200, most likely. That is only 5 grams of carbs. Where is the other 70 grams of carbohydrates? It has been whisked away very rapidly thanks to insulin and your muscles and your liver. Otherwise, that would have been toxicity. If you couldn't take those other 70 grams and quickly rid yourself of them, and your ability to rid yourself of that extra 70 grams is going to determine disease and death. You can't afford to have that extra 70 grams floating around in your bloodstream. Your blood sugar would be 1,000 and you'd be dead. Insulin's job is critically important. Without it, you're screwed. And if you have insulin resistance, you need more insulin for the same effect. So what happens is the blood sugar gets really high and they release a ton of insulin. And insulin has a half-life, just like any other drug. It has to be cleared. It has to be metabolized by the liver very rapidly and then whisked away. So your pancreas makes insulin. Half of it is eaten up, chewed up by the liver. Then it circulates in the bloodstream for a few minutes, and then it's degraded and returned again. That cycle is, your body is making a lot of insulin. That is very taxing, especially on a pancreas that may be fat. You may have fatty pancreas. This makes it difficult. Okay. And so you see people skyrocketing all over the place. When you over-release insulin, your blood sugar drops like a rock. When you hit refined carbohydrates, I think it's worth just watching every once in a while, like drink some juice and watch your blood sugar go from 100 to 200 to 50. And you're like, oh, right? No wonder you feel like crap 2-3 hours later, right? Your blood sugar is 50. Of course you do. And the brain senses the drop. And when the brain senses the drop in nutrients in the bloodstream, it says, you better eat. Come on, We got to eat. We don't want to die here. Get eating, right? Blood sugar just dropped. We're in the 50s. Do so. I've seen people, and you don't have to be in the 50s. I've seen people have full on low blood sugar symptoms, the sweating, like the hangry. A lot of people, I had this too as well. They get hangry. This is a low blood sugar. They need to think, okay, why is my blood sugar low? Let's back up. Back up 2 hours. What did I eat? What did I drink? Like trying to get people to think about what they're eating and opening their minds to their lifestyle and how it's affecting their health is a big part of what I like to do is go, hey, you feel like crap right now because of this food. Did you notice how it tanked you? You're at 56. I've had people like have symptoms when their blood sugar went from like 300 to 200 and they're like, oh my gosh, they're sweating, their heart's racing, they feel horrible. You dropped them too fast, right? They're not used to, their brain is not used to operating on a much lower glucose. And this is the crux of the problem. This is how it started. This whole thing started with our misunderstanding that the brain needs dietary glucose to survive. You want your brain to burn 80% fat, not 80% carbs. Take control of your brain. It's yours. It's your organ. You can take control over it. You can switch the fuel source. The brain would rather run on ketones than it would ever run on carbohydrates. That is that's the biology. That's the reality. That is going to protect you against ever having any sort of mental illness, dementia, Alzheimer's disease. It will save your life, literally. Having that understanding and going, all right, how can I change my lifestyle in such a way that I can preserve my brain, right? And make my brain run on fat instead of carbs. Now I've got an energy level of the brain that is elevated and constant. There's no fluctuations. There's no dips. Because I know what that life was like. It was mood swings. And when you ask people as they're fluctuating, when they're eating carbohydrates, and you watch them and you say, how do you feel right now? I feel like crap. Well, look at your blood sugar. This is why. I want you to know why. Fats and proteins, I mean, it's all about like, I would point you to the work of Luc van Loon. He is a Dutch scientist. He knows a lot about carbohydrate metabolism and absorption of carbs, as well as absorption of protein. And he did, radioactive labeling of protein as well as carbohydrates to see how much did we really utilize, right? How much carbohydrates are we dependent upon? But more importantly, how do we increase muscle size and strength with the right diet? And he was looking at amino acid uptake. Leucine is a very important. Branched chain amino acids are incredibly important. They're very anabolic. In order for you to get enough of the essential amino acids in an absorbable way, you must have it with fat, and that beautiful combination comes from animal sources. And women, as you get older, you don't have the room in your total calories for the day to be wasting it on carbohydrates from plants. There's no point in having plants. You don't have the room for it. Not to mention, whoever said that this was absolutely necessary? We have kind of a movement, and I've had to kind of migrate my message because Steve Finney, Jeff Folek, Verta Health. I have followed Verta Health since the inception. I love that company. I love what they do. They're coaching, and they have a firm belief that that fiber is absolutely necessary. And I'm not in agreement on it because of my own personal. This is N of 1 for me. I know what works for me. And when I was doing fiber, I did not do well. It seemed to have quite the reaction. The poisonous reaction of fiber is what I would call it. Like, no, I don't think I need to have the runs every day. I don't think that's normal, but I wasn't sure. And I kind of had that leap of faith going like, you know what? I tell everybody the same thing. You're eventually just going to come down to the optimal diet, which is going to be a carnivore diet. And I tell my patients, especially men, because men respond really well. I'm sorry, ladies, but they do. Because especially if they're like a former athlete, they have the muscle. They can easily go, increase their muscle mass. They have more testosterone. But when you just tell a dude like, hey, do you like barbecues? Like, imagine every day's a barbecue and no sides. Like, this is easy now, man. There's no excuse. You can batch cook. This is easy. And if I only have like just a few minutes with somebody, like, quickest to carnivore wins every time. You pick. You want a salad? Okay, go ahead. Have your chicken. Like, okay, whatever. But I'm just telling you, the way eventually you're going to come to the same conclusion. But you know what? When we go back and we think about the vegan and vegetarian, if you think about the only way that they would feel good about themselves is kind of through their diet, because we have this rescue pet mentality where we are on this moral plane, which is, I don't want to hurt any animals. And because I chose this food, I feel good about choosing that food, but I don't feel good.
I don't feel good about this animal. You know, that's
yes.
That's another mindset shift. Is like, you are an animal too. You should care for you. You should care for your own animal before anything else. It's like putting the oxygen mask on yourself before others idea.
Yeah. And but it's like you don't know until you've tried. And I would say just give me 3 weeks. Give me 3 weeks. Give me that. I just want 3 weeks. And if I'm totally wrong, money back guarantee, whatever, like you can come after me and haunt me for the rest of my life. But I'm 100% certain that in 3 weeks, you're going to feel different. You're going to feel and look better. Absolutely. Every single, and it's not like some patients, and it's like, oh, well, it only works on certain body types or certain blood types, or no, it works on Homo sapiens. You know, it's just everybody, and it's like that's what's fanning our flames here. This is what's fueling everything. We're all getting together and going, hey, I got a case. Let me tell you about this patient. Let me tell you about that. Like it works in everybody, and it's not like we're skipping out on patients where it didn't work. I don't have that list. The only list that I have of who it didn't work on were people that didn't want to change. Say, yeah, that's a great diet, but I'm just not going to give up my alcohol.
Or they didn't power through the oxalate dumping phase, or the transition phase. I know a bunch of people that they just ran into that and they said, oh, I feel way worse, and then they quit, and then they go tell people how bad carnivore is, when really that was their body just purging all those toxins that had accumulated. So it was doing the right thing. They just didn't make it to the other side. And that's so frustrating to see, because they're so close to getting it.
So close. Mm-hmm. Keto flu, same thing. You're like, oh, I did keto. Really? Okay. Well, tell me about it. Well, I'm like, did you ever measure? Did you ever know you were actually in ketosis? Like, did you ever bother getting a machine? Like show me your labs. Show me. I want to see I love interpreting labs. I love. Lipid panel is my fave. But like and this is like the telltale. Like, okay, in 3 months' time, your triglycerides are going to drop like a rock if you did it right. I mean, it's going to go from 200 to 100 in a very short period of time. You're going to be out of danger zone. And I will honestly know if you're doing the diet or not by your labs. So there's no randomized control double blind. It's like, oh yeah, if I was involved in these studies, like, well, I know that person was definitely on the ketogenic diet because the triglycerides dropped like a rock. Just like you would know somebody's on a statin when their LDL drops like a rock, right? Yeah. So it's so powerful. But I will have to say that it's not, people who are on insulin or on diabetes medication need to be really aware, because this is very dangerous. Like, if people take the same insulin dose or same medication and they change the diet without having someone monitor or give them some sort of advice as to how to self-monitor on their own, then this could be dangerous. And I've seen it. Like, have a conversation with the patient and say, hey, you need to call me in the morning because I need to know what your blood sugars are, right? And if you don't call me in the morning, this could be pretty bad. This could be pretty lethal. And then they call you a couple of days later and they go, hey, my blood sugar is 45. Are you still taking insulin? Yes. Like, whoa, hey, these are loaded guns that we hand out to patients. And I can tell you as a pharmacist, there is no way these patients get enough education. They have no idea what they're doing. It is so, so scary. And then you look at, how if they don't have someone looking over their shoulders, I've seen this before where they'll be taking insulin and you look at their CGM and you download their data and look at it like, wait a minute, you went from 350 to 50. You could kill yourself here. Do you have any idea what you're doing? Right. And so it's just, to me, it's really scary. If you do this diet and you You don't change them. You don't get a hold of your doctor. You don't let someone know who's skilled and can monitor and watch you and get you off of the medication. You're playing a very dangerous game, because this is like doubling up your insulin dose, because it's really going to lower your blood sugar. But at the same time, it really improves insulin sensitivity. I mean, I like to let's just play it safe. Let's go to 0. I want to know where you are. I want to know what your blood sugar normally is. Let's just see what it is. By the time, typically when you get diagnosed, your A1C is 9, 10, whatever. And you've been at least at that blood sugar over 300 for months, at least 3 months, right? Because that's what the A1C is how much glucose essentially is stuck to a red blood cell for that life of that red blood cell, which is 3 to 4 months. So the more glucose stuck to it, the higher your blood sugar average has always been. It's always being too high. So typically we diagnose 9, 10. We start them on insulin right away, right? I'm going to give you a loaded gun. I hope that you know what you're doing with this, right? And you know what? I really thought I could solve the world's problems with calculating people's insulin dose. That's how far I've come. Like insulin, I can help everybody with their insulin calculation. Call me if you're eating and I'll go over your insulin to carbohydrate ratio so we can figure out what your dose is. That's really was my mindset. I could solve diabetes if people would let me dose them, which is really a bad idea. But that's kind of like the punch that I drank when I studied the ADA guidelines, and I'm thinking, man, I look like such a fool. But then I was like, wait a minute. Sarah Hallberg said, ignore the guidelines in 2015. And I'm like, okay, she's right. Get rid of these guidelines. These are conflicted as hell. ADA taking money from industry. Of course you're telling us 70 grams of carbs, 3 meals a day at least, because the brain needs it. Glucose is brain food. Whoever, that study was really flawed. You know what I like is the work of Robert Cahill. He fasted people for a month. Their average blood sugar was like 70. And then these are conscientious objectors to World War II. And this is like, we're doing these starvation studies because like when we get to Europe and free the Jews from the concentration camps, we don't want to overfeed them. We don't hurt them. So there was some research that we did, but unfortunately we started quite late, like 1945. But anyways, give them insulin after a month and their blood sugar is 70, which is quite low. And their blood sugar dropped to 20. And the results of the experiment are they didn't die. They didn't die. Their blood sugar went to 20 and the brain survived. They didn't go into a coma. They were fat adapted. The brain was used to burning very, very little glucose and almost all fat. The brain was completely fat adapted. The amount of glucose that the brain needs is actually really low. It's probably more like 20-25%. And whatever glucose that you don't eat, you're going to make from other substrates, like what you said. Absolutely. You want that recycling and you want to push your body to do that. And that is exactly what will feed your body. Like for myself, feed my body during that long exercises, right? Become fat adapted, have a better energy level constantly. And I've noticed that since I'm always feeding off of information, that the memory is better, sleep is better. Like I'm getting better sleep at night. I'm able to remember and recall things that I didn't think I could before, right? I mean, a lot of this is my pure just love and addiction for information, right? And sharing and being this empath and helping people, because that's the high. We're all just addicts. You're getting high if I'm getting high. I'm getting high if I'm helping people, which is, hey, what a great purpose, right? Knowing that you're giving back to your tribe, giving back to, I owe it to so many people that have gotten me here and have helped me help other people. Like I think of how many people I've helped. It's like, this is so empowering. I just want to share it with the world. So I support people like you who are trying to make this common knowledge, right? How do we make it so, like, I remember seeing for the first time, I forget what year it was. It's probably like 2013 or 2014. I remember seeing the first keto burrito at El Pollo Loco. I'm like, this is the word, it's there. And I thought, wow, this is it's happening. Oh my gosh. I thought it was such a big deal. Yeah, and I was doing this LCHF intermittent fasting, trying to convince patients that fasting would cure their diabetes, the Jason Fung way, and that was a really tough sell. That was almost impossible. But I did have a following, and it was really really reassuring to go. You are no longer diabetic, or you've reversed your diabetes, you're off your medications, you now have this type of life. Look what I can do. I'm a kick-ass grandma, I'm a kick-ass grandpa. Like, I'm a big fan of Peter Attia and looking at like how can we improve our quality of life, right? So this is about being a kick-ass grandpa for me. I've got several grandkids, and I want them out on the water with me. I want them to tell me to slow down, right? You're running too fast, grandpa, right? I want the race to the door, right? That's what I do with my little dude. We race to the door. Everywhere we go, it's a race. Remember that when you were a little kid trying to race, like, okay, I'll race grandpa. So yeah, it's not about always letting them win either. I hate to say it, but no, it's like, what's my goal? What's my quality of life that I'm after? It's like I feel like I've been able to achieve so many almost like physical feats that just kind of happen as like a side effect of how I've been eating. Like I worked a whole year to be able to run a mile, and I really wanted that. So I really like, I've never had any physical goals that I like stuck after for a year. Like I was running in the middle of, I was running at night, running with dumbbells on, and then I would be paddling the waterways nearby. And there was just these canals that you could so easily get lost in, and I was just like, what can I do next? Right. What is the next feat? So then it was racing, and then it's this, like everything just kind of led to another improvement. And I have to look back and go, wow, look how far you've come. Look, like I usually don't compare very far. Like just go back a couple of weeks. Like, what can I do now? Now it's like, well, what do you want to do? Right? Like, where do you want to go? What body of water would you like to go check out? Like, I live on a river. I used to live at a lake, right? I'm always near the water. Movement is my medicine. Movement is it's such a great place to let all the frustrations out. I've shed many tears, and I've had a lot of frustration poured out over the water, and it's like that is the best relief with the best side effects. I mean, yeah, I've gained. I'm not as explosive as I was when I was younger, but I certainly have gained more strength, and I think it's certainly a testament of the diet. But most importantly, I've really try to improve on my protein intake, because I really feel like it's coming down to muscle in the end. And my protein intake is incredibly important. And in order for me to hit my protein goals, especially if you're doing some time interval based eating, and you're eating in like say a 6 or 8 hour window, you're going to have difficulties hitting your protein goals. I need 150 grams. It's going to be difficult. So I do add shakes, a branched chain amino acid shake into my morning kind of routine. After workout, you have the shake, 3 hours later, I get my 25 grams. And then I wait for quite a while, and there's no other, it's just protein. And then I'm doing, carnivore for the rest of the day in that short window. And that seems to provide the best benefit, but unless you really need to do a DEXA scan to really know if you're moving the needle at all. Am I increasing my lean body mass, and am I decreasing my fat mass? And really, the DEXA scan is really the only way to kind of determine that. So,
I've been planning to do one of those actually, because I'm a member of this really cool company called Crowd Health. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but it's basically like a crowdfunding model for healthcare, like getting people off of insurance and just using like more of a crowdfunding thing, where you can
oh
join a
wow,
certain group, like a subgroup within the community. And I want to join the carnivore group, because the idea is there's less people that need all this healthcare because they're super healthy. And so you're I don't even remember if they have a word. Your premiums are replaced with just the occasional notification that someone had a health event, they need help, and you basically just give them some money. But it's super low in the carnivore world. And in order to qualify for that group, you need to get a DEXA scan and basically just prove that you're super healthy. So I need to do that. That's on my list.
Send me the link on that. That
I
sounds
will.
cool.
It's really,
Yeah.
I had the CEO, Andy Shoot, over on a podcast. He was like in my first 10 episodes, basically explaining the whole thing. So I'll send that to you. It's really an interesting concept.
Oh,
I'm super excited
I want
for
to
that.
interview him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, send
Yeah,
me his info.
I will.
You've got
I will.
you have some good resources for me. I need to tap into you.
I have a bunch of cool stuff to send you, man. I'm looking forward to it for sure. I think I can find you some people you've never heard of that are really going to take you down some interesting rabbit holes for sure.
I want to go down. Yes. Yes. I'm always anxious to learn more.
Yes.
But it's all about like you're hacking, you're using metrics, you're using something that's measurable to tweak your lifestyle. DexaFit is important for anyone as they start their journey, because like how much muscle loss are you going to tolerate? Can you tolerate? Like that's what it comes down to. You cannot afford to lose that muscle. That muscle is so precious and it's very hard to gain back. Very difficult, especially as you get older. This is not something that we can just ignore the fact that Ozempic, destroys so much muscle. We can't afford. It's not just muscle. We don't equate bones as protein. We don't understand that. Like that's protein that is going to be absorbed. You're reforming this stuff all the time. You're rebuilding, reforming. What Luke Van Loon said. What he goes, you're absorbing about 70 to 100 grams of protein per day, but you're turning over 300 to 400 grams. So where is all that 200 to 300 grams? It's changing, something here and rebuilding it over here. Like you have a new arm every 6 months. Like your brain is different. Like you're turning over all these tissues because of protein. That protein is being turned over. You need to make sure you've got adequate protein. Imagine the person, this is unfortunate, this is anabolic resistance at its finest. My mom taking in like 30 grams for the whole day. That's never going to be enough. So where is it coming from? That's your gluconeogenesis that you want to avoid. You don't want to be taking amino acids and converting those into glucose to feed this glucose hungry brain. Because that's exactly
I think my mom's in the exact same boat. I hate to say it. Like I think that this is that whole generation. Well, I guess we have different generations of moms, but they've fallen into this similar trap because the same corrupt systems have really targeted women the most. And that's why I definitely appreciate you like highlighting how important this is specifically for women. I try to do that too. I'm bringing on as many ladies as I can to tell their story because this is so much more damaging to women than it is for men. Because the way that I think of it is just the fact that their hormonal system is so much more complex than us guys. So it especially needs to have the right building blocks. And if it doesn't, then you're guaranteed to have problems all over the place. I'm not sure if you would have a different answer to that, like why it's even more important for women. But
like going into menopause, if you've already reduced your muscle mass, coming out of menopause without supplementing estrogen, like how are you going to fend off that storm of sarcopenia? You're already well started. This is anabolic resistance. This is the fact that you can't gain that muscle mass. But we've encouraged women to do the treadmill and not lift heavy. That's a problem.
And the plant-based diet. Heavy. Like they get more of the plant-based diet messaging, and they're also told to just toil away on the treadmill for hours a day. Worst combo.
That's your 35 to 50, right? That like they need to be lifting heavy. They need to be going all out on the cardio and go home and then go eat some protein. Go eat some heavy protein meals and make that stimulus work. Don't waste that stimulus at the gym. And all I tell people, if you're on the treadmill, 6 months from now, you're going to be burning less calories doing the exact same 30-minute, 40-minute workout. You're just becoming more efficient at the exact same movement. Do you need efficiency? I don't want to be efficient. Like for example, you go paddle 30 minutes, you're going to be exhausted, you're going to be sore the next day. I have to go like so much longer and do because of the efficiency. Do I want to develop mitochondrial efficiency for that movement? Great, but that's not going to create an adaptive response. We should be focusing on adaptive response. I need a stimulus that's severe and significant enough so the next 2-3 meals I'm absorbing as much protein as possible from my meals, and I'm going to increase type 2 fast twitch muscles, not type 1. Type 1 is that endurance muscle that allows me to go long periods of time. That's the slow twitch. That doesn't equal longevity. Type 2 fiber and muscle mass equals longevity. The type of muscle that responds to significant resistance. And like I would tell you, ladies, hey, get off the treadmill, like what you're saying. Get off the treadmill, get in with the dumbbells. Don't go too long, but make it intense and then go home. Go all out. Get sore. And maybe you don't go back until the soreness is gone, or you work another body part.
You're not going to get bulky and look like a man, I promise. They're all scared of that.
There is no way you can do that. You don't have enough testosterone, and it's so stupid. I'm sorry. That is really
the amount of misconceptions floating around is just maddening.
I don't know what they're thinking, what they think that they might, if they go into the gym and lift a couple of dumbbells, that they're all of a sudden going to have this no neck, like, my husband doesn't want me anymore because I have this massive neck. Like, no, relax. Tone is great, right? Get strong. I feel like we've got a long ways to go when it comes to movement. And I would say Dr. Gabriel Lyons, Lyman, as well as Peter Tia, as well as, I keep going, but if you listen to these people and the emphasis on muscle strength and the health of the muscle, you'll come down to the conclusion that this muscle is helping not just my body and my insulin sensitivity, but it's helping my brain. Like the brain mental health connection, and I mean the body and the metabolism of our bodies along with the metabolism of our brain are so interconnected, and we're ignoring it. Like the depression and inflammation, right? Alzheimer's disease and muscle mass falling, like and Alzheimer's disease, type 3 diabetes. Like, when are we going to equate that schizophrenia, depression, bipolar, mood disorders are all just food? It's all your metabolism. Let's stop looking where the light's shining, and let's look everywhere else where the root cause could possibly be, right? It's not just there. It's probably what you're putting in your mouth 3 times a day. And we're never taught that in school. You just, like, nutrition is it's ignored. I got quite a bit of it, and it just came down to memorizing. And that's what I would say about pharmacy school. You just memorize. You're just good at memorizing tables and charts, right? But connecting, like when I found this stuff out, everything had to connect. Everything, like, the root cause of hypertension and the root cause of cardiovascular, like everything, like going all the way back to root cause was, for me, the most exciting thing of putting all these connections. I've got all these cues and the information that I have, and then I'm molding it into wait a minute, now I've got something here. Now I've got like truth. And I've learned all these different facets of the truth. And that has been this exciting road of utilizing my background. Otherwise, I wasted a bunch of time going to school. Literally, it would have been it's just a complete waste of time. And then imagine at my age going, yeah, I'm just hurting people. What do you mean? I wasn't trying to hurt people. Like, I wasn't trying to do anything harmful. But now that Hippocratic oath, once you know, like, you can't do no. It is do no harm. You can't willingly and knowingly dispense things that are hurting people, and it's totally avoidable. Yeah, there's a lot of I do like talking about conflicts of interest in industry, but we'll have to do that another time. I love
that's
the book.
What I'm thinking. Yeah. Go ahead.
The book Sickening, Dr. Paul Abramson. Another book is RFK's The Real Anthony Fauci. Very interesting. I know it's conspiracy theory and all this craziness, but it's like
conspiracy theories or spoiler alerts is what I've learned in the last few years.
Yeah. Well, but what's crazy is he wrote the book and he says, I am open to alternative facts. Go ahead, submit them. I will entertain. Like, no one's submitted anything. No one's debated him. And I wouldn't put it past anyone to hurt American people for the benefit of corporate greed. No one's going to jail. No one, nothing really happens to anybody. You get a fine or something. Like, I really appreciate COVID for this purpose, was that all of a sudden people woke up and went, wait a minute, maybe the government doesn't have my best interest. Maybe these aren't really regulatory bodies. Maybe these aren't regulatory agencies that really have my best interest at stake. Maybe these regulatory industries and these people are taking money, and and everybody can find out. Not a lot of people know, but it's openpaymentsdata.cms.gov. You can look up your doctor as long as you know where he lives, run it through there and see how much money he gets paid from industry. Now, remember, though, when you see $9, $10 meal or a $15 meal, that means the whole office got the same meal. So when you walk in, so I do this because I try to like help coaches, help doctors say, hey, refer your patients to me. I do private coaching. And they hand you a calendar, right? They hand you a calendar, and because it's like what the drug reps do. They hand you a calendar and say, just sign up for one of these dates, put your name and phone number on. Okay, that's nice. Now, here is the menu that we like on, would you sign up on? Oh, on Tuesdays. This is what we like. And this person, this is what they usually get. And they're basically telling you how you're going to buy them lunch. And that calendar is packed. Every single day, a drug rep is coming by and teaching that doctor about what medications to prescribe. And guess what? They know. Hey, doc, we were here about a month ago. We noticed that your prescriptions kind of dove a little bit on that new drug. Have you been talking to another drug rep? You've been cheating on us? Like, literally, this is how this goes. I've listened to it. And I used to go to these meetings. I used to go to these drug rep meetings, and I remember the last one I went to, and never again. I was furious. I got there early, wanted to talk to the endocrinologist, and I said, hey, you know what? I have just discovered the most exciting thing ever, that food, if we do a low carbohydrate diet, we can get people off insulin. Isn't this exciting? And he just kind of looked at me and didn't say anything to me. The first words out of his mouth in this discussion was, diabetes is a progressive disease. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry to call it. I'm going to call it like it is. You're a whore. You are taking money from industry and saying whatever. It's their slides, right? And you're going to go on and on about how that's your favorite drug and how you prescribe that, when the reality is you're just getting paid a couple grand. We got all of our friends together. We're having a very expensive steak meal on somebody's dime. And he's going to walk out of there with bags of food. He doesn't want to talk to you. He sure as hell doesn't want to talk to me. So he walks out. I'm like, no, don't ever invite me to another meeting again. I will never go to one of those. I would never want to partake. That is completely 100% wrong. And diabetes is not a progressive disease. And you know better. As an endocrinologist, you know better. Type 2 diabetes is too much insulin. Why are you prescribing insulin ever? You know better. I want to say it was Dr. Gary Fettke spoke down, and he's the Tasmanian orthopedic surgeon, and he has spoken out heavily about, I think you've had him on your show. Am I right?
Not Gary Fettke. I'd love to at some point.
Oh, nice guy. Oh, what a wonderful
person. I've listened to him a lot. He's excellent.
Anyway, and he spoke to a bunch of endocrinologists, and shortly after that, I want to say Australian Diabetes Association has adopted low carbohydrate diet as a a treatment to treat type 2 diabetics, which is a big deal because we're not getting that, but they're getting that in Australia. So kudos to their hard work, because it's people like Gary Fettke, James Mukey as well. He's influencing. I love this. He's trying to put CGMs on people in Parliament in Australia and convince them that the CGM is, and a low carbohydrate diet produces the best results. What an amazing influence, right? Let's see how this works out. But Gary's a pretty impressive person. But
yeah, those
like
real results are how we make it happen. And there's so many people in any of these fields that we talk about, the whether it's the medical field, the pharmaceuticals, or even the political side, like you mentioned, it's full of great people that want to help others. They're just stuck in
Yeah.
this system that's giving them bad information, and
Yeah.
the lie just runs so deep that they've been trained so deeply to believe it, and they're not trying to hurt people. We just have to help them find the right
No,
info.
no. And I really think, and we should be honest about physicians, and that is, it's not their fault. They are not to blame. And I really like what Ken Berry said. He's like, it's not your fault, but it's still your problem. Like you can't do much about where you are right now, right? As far as how you got here. It hasn't been your fault. It's been misinformation after misinformation. It's all driven by industry. But once you've gotten to this point, man, the rest is the best journey ever. And that journey, man, it's I love that quote about the man that loves to walk will walk further than the man that loves the destination. I've never thought about the destination. I've just always thought, like, how can I paddle faster? How can I get up tomorrow and do the exact same thing? Because this was really fun. I want to do this again. This has been an exciting day for me. I've learned, I've paddled, I've learned something, and now I'm going to make it stick through my movement. I'm going to help my brain absorb what I just learned. And so the combination of movement and knowledge and information is such an stimulating environment that will produce nothing but really, I think people that are incredibly aware and metabolically healthier. And people, honestly, you know what? I want people to look better. I want more people out on the water with me. That is my selfish reason. It would be really, really nice that if I was on a lake and I wasn't the only person here, right? So encouraging people to move is a big part of what I'm trying. I want people to feel better, look better, and start moving. And that typically happens when you fix the nutrition first. You fix the nutrition, they have more energy. And then I don't even bring up exercise. I never talk about exercise until months into this. But I usually don't have to say anything to them because they're like, oh, Kyle, I took up walking. Oh, I started running again. Like, I didn't say anything about exercise. They just automatically took it up and they're enjoying it. They have more energy. They have to move. You can't help but move. You can't stop yourself from moving. You start finding like you've got twitches and like you're constantly, you can't sit still. You're out walking around all the time. It's like, that's your go-to because you have so many of your fat cells that just opened up and just said, burn. Let's just burn. We got so much extra. Let's just generate heat, just waste it. Right? Let's just keep doing it. And we have the luxury of living on the Sacramento River where we have a place to do a cold plunge. We can do cold plunges all day long. If we're in the river's very cold, upper 40s, low 50s. So we can go out there and get a nice little chill going. So yeah, it's the whole lifestyle that benefits people. And I always get this positive feedback. And those results, I really feel like is my success. That's my return on investment. I've been doing this for free for so long, giving advice, and then they come back a month later. Oh man, I feel great. Like that's what it's all about for me. That's my high. That's my drug. That's what makes me feel like, okay, Kyle, don't stop. Keep learning. Don't ever quit. It's having a positive effect on people. You cannot stop. So now this is my full-time job, doing this social media, influencing, interviews, podcasts, making reels. Yeah, it's fun. I love doing this. I think of so many reels. It's overwhelming. It's like I have so many ideas of what to do, but I think it would be fun with someone like you to do this. Like, okay, you got your headphones on, you got your camera, your spy goggles on, and you're going up to a total stranger. And I'm telling you, I want you to go up to that lady right there, ask her this, and see if you can get her to say, makes sense. That makes sense, without disturbing them.
I love that idea. It's like a fun challenge. What my favorite comedy show by a landslide is called Impractical Jokers. Have you heard of this? Have you seen it?
That's my inspiration. Yes,
it's the best. Yes. It's my favorite show of all time. And you could do something like that where you just go out in public and there's a challenge. Like, see if you can get this person to say, oh, that makes sense. Or just like have the light bulb moment come on. Yeah.
I wouldn't mind going to Washington and do some paddling though.
Hey, you got a connection here now. Hit me up. I'd love to.
You're not that far.
If you have an extra board, I'd love to try. Like I said, I think
Okay,
I
I
did it
got
one
tons of
time,
boards.
and it was just on a giant surfboard, and it wasn't very relaxing.
Oh, I'll make it a better experience.
Yes, I love it, man. Well, bro, I have a huge round 2 circled in my notes here. We got to do this again. I didn't get to any of the real questions I had because you had so much cool other stuff to share, and that's the way I love it. So it was such a pleasure talking, man. I think crossing the 2-hour mark, we should wrap it up here for folks.
I gotta go.
Yeah. So
all right. So nice talking with you, Ben. I love it. Let's get together.
Sounds good, man. Where can people follow you?
All right. Oh, unscriptedpharmacist.com.
Beautiful. See you later.